Hello everyone, it's me, Chaff Commander Coffee, and we're back with our first episode. Well, it's second episode, but first episode of real gameplay in my Realism Invictus 3.5 guide series. And I had some comments from you guys when I first made the series for version 3.4, which I didn't realise 3.5 was ready, that said, please continue this, it's helpful. So we're going to redo what we had done. If you watched the previous video, then this is going to be more of the same, but slightly different, so I still recommend you tune in, take a look at this, because I've changed what I recommend as your opening moves in the game, which might come as a surprise to some of you, but there you go. I will start this video by talking about, so when I did game setup, we are using a standard play now, we're not doing custom game, so this is the standard settings, default settings, if you were to click play now and just go through on whatever map script you play. So, in the standard settings, there is no tech trading. Tech trading is not a thing. Realism Invictus is not balanced for tech trading, so it's automatically turned off. So, I normally play without tech trading in standard Civilization anyway, so I'm fine with this setting being as it is. Personal preference for you guys might differ, but again, this is just the standard settings. Some of the other standing settings, there is no raging barbarians, so barbarians are just standard. However, barbarians will, with this new feature in 3.5, they will form their own civilizations. So in previous versions, barbarians would build cities if you left them to their own devices for long enough, but they would just send hordes of barbarians to go and fight you. Now, barbarian cities will spawn after time, and they will make their own civilizations. So if you start the game with 9 civs in the game, eventually there will be more than 9 civilizations if you leave the barbarians to do their thing. I find from my sort of trial runs, generally speaking, on a standard map, about 2 civilizations will appear from barbarian cities if you don't keep tabs on them. Which is not necessarily a bad thing, because the new civs that spawn won't be particularly powerful and might make useful trade or allies if you spread your religion to them or whatever. But it does depend. I also found that barbarian civs will not appear in locations where they have not been discovered. So barbarians may build cities on, let's say for example, the New World, but they will not create civilizations unless a player has discovered that city. So that's an important distinction, that civs will not, you will not go to a new continent. For example, if you're playing on a map which has Old World and New World, you won't appear in the New World and there'll suddenly be 8 civilizations there that are constantly beating each other up, and or one of them's taken control and just become a massive powerhouse. That won't happen. As far as I'm aware, from my tests, that doesn't happen. I may get another email from Walter saying that's wrong, but I'll update you guys in the next episode or so if that changes in any way. Some of the other settings that are put on by default, there are tribal villages and there are random events. I personally do not like tribal villages and random events, but that is on by default, so we will be playing with them. Sometimes it makes your game horrific and you'll get loads of bad events early on that will really cripple your nation. Other times you'll get loads of good events that just slingshot you into a really strong position. And same goes with tribal villages. For example, I have a tribal village right here. If I settle my city, I may just get a free technology. I may just get some maps. I could get another warrior. I don't know, but they are on by default, so there they are. Some of the other settings that are not on is revolutions. By default, revolutions are not on in 3.5. However, when you play a custom game, you can turn revolutions on. From the last email I got from Walter telling me about the version 3.5 and how it works, revolutions is included in 3.5 because they've done a hell of a lot of work getting it to, well, actually work in Realism Invictus, because they have their sort of own version of the revolution system. If you played other mods with revolutions, it works differently. Not massively differently, it's still recognizable, but it does work differently in Realism Invictus. Yeah, so revolutions are not on by default. and the AI, if you turn it on, apparently the AI doesn't handle it particularly well right now. The higher difficulty you play on, the easier I imagine the AI handles it, because the AI just has more bonuses and can just spit out more units to handle revolutions and that sort of thing. But I'm not sure. I haven't trialed revolutions a huge amount yet, but I didn't seem to have any problems with them. Then again, I was only in the classical era, and I wasn't proper expanding very quickly, or very, I wasn't doing lots of strong expansion, but I didn't have any issues with revolutions. I didn't have a single problem with them, so we'll see. When I do my actual Let's Play, like a full Let's Play of Realism Invictus, I'll tell you what I'm planning with that later, when I get around to, finishing the guide. But I will be playing with revolutions. But for now, there will be no revolutions. I can't think of anything else I need to go over as per default settings, so we're just going to start the game. And when we start the game, we have a few things we need to do. So we've got a settler, we've got to build a city, and we've got to find a good spot for that city. We also have a warrior that can go and explore. I recommend, before you build a city, ignore the blue circle. You want to move your warrior. And you want to try and discover as much land as you possibly can with this warrior before you build your city, to try find resources. And the area that your city can work is here. So if I put that down now, if I were to settle here, I don't know what resources are in the top here, I don't know what's here, I don't know what's here, and I don't know what's over here. Now, you might be able to, if you zoom down, you can kind of see what's in the next tile beyond, in the fog of war. So I can tell there's a forest here, there's no forest here, there's a hill here, there's a hill here, and there's nothing here. There's nothing here, there's nothing here, there's a savannah here, and there's a hill here. So I want to try and discover as much land as I can. Normally going onto a hill is the best way to do that. I think I want to discover more land around this river, so I'm going to move my warrior this way. So what we did is we discovered that there is deer and pigs. Now the pigs aren't actually in our working radius, but we want them to be. So it's a good job we didn't settle on our first turn, because we will want pigs. And spices are a good resource, but they're not useful until later on. So we'll have a much better position if we actually move down here and settle here instead. So that's what we're going to do. Let's settle right there. Okay, so because our warrior was down here and he didn't spawn up here, we couldn't see the coastline. That's okay, we'll build another city up there later on so we can get access to the spice as well. Okay, so I'm going to just remove this and talk about the first things you should do when you've built your city. So, I highly recommend you prioritize growth, which is this button down here. And there's a couple of new features with Realism Invictus 3.5, which is there's some more interface options down here. You can tell your city not to grow. You can tell it to avoid growth when it would become unhappy, when it would become unhealthy, and to avoid epidemics, which are another feature in Realism Invictus that I'll go into a bit later on. So it's pretty handy. I recommend you focus on growth and avoid unhappiness, because unhappy population doesn't work. So there's no point growing your city if the people that it grows into won't work anyway. So I just recommend you put those two on. The next thing is you want to build something. And I think the first thing that you should build, now this has changed. I think the first thing you should build is actually a worker. Because the sooner you can get these resources hooked up, the more you're producing and the easier of a time you'll have. So I actually recommend you build a worker. This changed. I used to say that you should build a warrior to help scout, then a scout, and then a worker once you found more resources. Now, generally speaking, your first city will always have some food resources nearby it. Hopefully in its first circle, which we have got, our first cultural borders, we've got food resources because we moved our city, which is why it's important to scout with your warrior first. So yeah, good stuff. I'm going to build a worker first, and the first technology you should do is still the same. I recommend you get tool making so you can get scouts as soon as possible. Tool making will also let us build a camp on these deer, so it will help us enable our resources in our borders. After that, just end turns and start scouting. You want to scout by prioritizing moving on hills, and you want to scout and sort of circle around your civilization. Now we're quite close to the coast, so what I will end up doing is probably sending this warrior around and then looping round to discover the coastline, because finding coastal resources is one of the easiest ways to map out where you might put early cities. Coastal resources is pretty handy. Oh, and we found a tribal village. So you want to go around in a circle and stay close to yourself, because you might find more tribal villages. And this tribal village gave us a map. So we don't really need to explore up here, because they kind of explored for us. There are a few dark patches, but I'm not massively interested in checking those out just yet. And because of that, what we're going to do is we're going to send our warrior down to the southwest. So we finished tool making, which gives us scouts and other things. Second technology, early metalworking. Now, this does change depending. So if you're building a worker, and your worker would finish before you have a technology that lets you build tile improvements, then I recommend you research the technology that lets you build tile improvements. However, because we got tool making and we have deer, we can build a camp there. So I'm going to go early metalworking because it's very good tech. It reveals copper, that's the important thing, which is an early sort of warfare resource that we will want to try and get access to. So we're going to carry on scouting, research metalworking, and after that we'll research some more technologies that help with our sort of early resource acquisition. Okay, so early metalworking is done. Next thing we want to do is get animal husbandry, and we want to get animal husbandry via agriculture. I don't rate the wheel very highly early on in the game. You want to get road building ideally before you start building roads, because otherwise you're connecting resources but you're not getting extra movement, and extra movement's very, very important. So I don't think getting wheel to animal husbandry is very good. Agriculture is much better. It allows you to build farms, it allows you to build wells and warehouses, which are all pretty good buildings, and farms are pretty necessary. And it also reduces the amount of epidemics. Now, epidemics, if you double click your city, in the top left you see a biohazard symbol. As your population grows and you research different technologies, epidemic chance will increase. And every turn there's a chance an epidemic will appear in literally any of your cities depending on their chance of it occurring. Epidemics will literally kill your population off. So a population 6 city that has an epidemic could drop to population 4, which is obviously a massive issue, because population is a lot harder to get in Realism Invictus, because they increased the amount of food that every person eats to 3 instead of 2. So food is a lot more important to grow your cities, and epidemics will kill your people, which then means that your cities have to grow again, which can be difficult if you don't have access to good food. So try to keep your epidemic chance low, and the best way to do that early on in the game is to prioritize technologies that reduce epidemic chance. Okay, so we're going to get our worker finished, and then we're going to build scouts, and I recommend building about 2 scouts. Well, you want to build as many scouts as you can prior to researching a particular technology, which we'll finish in a little bit. So we've finished agriculture, so we can build farms now. I found another tribal village, so we're going to pick that up. We've got 100 gold. So we're already sitting on 290 gold, which is handy because that will boost our early research. And our cultural board is expanded, so got that going for us as well. Okie dokie. So we're going to get some scouts, kind of carry on researching what we were researching. Found some gold. That is a pretty useful resource with our special jewelers, so it might be worth building a city down here at some point. I'm going to upgrade my early scouts with woodsmen, since there's a lot of woods early in the game, before people chop them all down. So it's a very good promotion for your scouts to have. Probably a lot better than guerrilla in my opinion. So I recommend getting woodsmen on your scouts. And this first scout we're going to get, he's just going to explore the coastline, because we want to follow the coast to see where good coastal cities are. We're not going to adopt pastoral nomadism. We only have 1 animal husbandry resource. If you have more than 1, it's probably worth adopting it, but if you've only got 1, probably not. And also we may want to build farms along this river. It is plains, which means it's not quite as good for farms, but it's still, you need your population to grow. Farms are the way to do that and still get other resources out of it. So after getting our early technologies to utilize our resources, we want to do one of 2 things. We need a military technology that will help us defend ourselves from barbarians and other civilizations, and we also want to discover more resources before we build our next city. And I would prioritize, to be on the safe side, getting a military technology. And if you're more experienced with the game, you can choose between archers or spearmen. I recommend you just pick woodworking. It will let you get the spearmen, which are good early defensive units. Archers are even more defensive, but they can be more situational as the barbarians get stronger. So I recommend spearmen as just an overall, standard, fairly decent unit. And woodworking also discovers a resource. It discovers prime timber, which is a very good resource to get early on. And it also allows you to chop woods down, which obviously you will need to be doing. So woodworking is the ideal technology to go for next. And our work is just going to continue to improve our land. And our scouts are going to carry on, well, scouting. So I'm going to leave this warrior here because he should be able to beat that lion. And this scout, I'm going to just have him avoid that lion for now. Scouts tend to be very good at killing wild animals early in the game, so... Oh, and we got a extra scouts. This is what I mean, like, tribal village got an extra scout, which is perfect because we need more scouts anyway. Unfortunately, our scout did get killed by that lion, but that's okay because we got another one. I'm actually going to go back and kill that lion for some XP, and also to, make sure it's not near my workers or anything like that. And we got woodworking. And after that, you just want to research things that will help discover resources. The next most important one, I'd say, is stone cutting, because it reveals stone. Stone is awesome. It enables you to build lots of wonders if you can find it, as well as also helping you build lots of defensive structures like walls, etc, etc. So stone cutting is good. Once you've finished researching woodworking and you've got some scouts out, I would recommend starting to build. Ignore the buildings that you've researched. Not useful just yet. Get African militia, or whatever your militia unit is. Train your early spearmen. My golden rule, or sort of advice for anybody playing on higher difficulties, especially because the barbarians there'll be a lot more barbarians. But for people that struggle with early wars, it's normally because you look weak. You don't build enough units. Realism Invictus, you've got to build more units. You can't build a civs, or playing a builder style of game doesn't mean you can neglect your military. If you neglect your military, you will get conquered. So what I recommend in the early game is you train one militia for every resource you intend on working on, and your main city. So in this case, we have deer, pigs, prime timber, which we just discovered, which is excellent, and our city. So we want to train 4 militia straight away. That's the first thing we're going to do, is train 4 militia. And that is basically our early buildings, for the start of the game. We're going to build a lot of soldiers. This means that A, we'll have troops to defend our civ. B, we'll have troops to defend our improvements, so barbarians don't burn them down and we just waste a bunch of turns on our workers. And C, we can also then move those militia later on to be able to defend our newly settled cities. So basically, it's just a good idea. I recommend everybody does this. I'm going to carry on exploring the coast. So the lions went there. We have a very high chance of beating them, so we're just going to attack them. And we're going to start moving over towards these hills over here. And we discovered stone cutting. We're going to carry on trying to discover resources. The next thing that helps us discover resources is weaving. It also provides a few economic buildings, which are quite handy. So I do like getting weaving quite early on. It's also useful for sailing, and since we are quite close to the coast, that's also going to be a handy technology we want to try and focus on getting. These warriors have been doing nothing. I accidentally told them to fortify. And we met our first civ, which is perfect because chances are you will meet a civ in your first 50 turns of playing the game. Now, as you get better at the game, you'll be able to tell what civs have personalities, and certain civs' personalities can be good or bad for you if you meet them early on. Now, as you get more experienced, you'll know what personalities to expect from different civs. But as a general rule of thumb, the best thing to do is take a look at their traits. So as we have traits, every other civilization has traits. This particular nation is the Koreans. This particular leader for the Koreans is spiritual and progressive. Now, spiritual leaders like to research and get a religion very early on, and they like civilizations who follow their religion. If you follow heathen religions, they tend to want to declare war on you. So keep that in mind. He's also progressive, which means he will focus on scientific buildings and getting ahead of the research compared to everyone else. However, he is arrogant, and I believe arrogant reduces the amount of espionage that he produces. So, should be easy to send spies after him. And since he's a scientific nation, might be a good idea to send spies to steal his research if he's ahead of our technology. So, all stuff that you can immediately upon meeting a civilization, you can decide some things about how you want to interact with them. Now, I know for a fact that the Koreans, along with a lot of other Asian civilizations, tend to not want to open borders. They tend to be more isolationist. I think the Koreans tend to be more defensive than warlike. So we don't need to worry about this guy early on as much as if, say, we were bordering the Vikings or something like that, or the Scandinavians. But, you know, it's good to identify like how a civilization is going to act. It makes a big difference to how you approach them and how it informs your early decisions in the game. So what we also want to do is we want to basically send a scout to reveal as much of their territory as we can, because we want to see what they have access to. If they've got access to copper, then that means they're going to have quite a powerful early game army, and we need to make sure that we're ready for that. If they don't have access to copper, or say they've got horses or any other sort of early military resource, we want to be able to find that if possible. So we're going to try and send scouts around their borders. So this warrior is going to come up here now, he's going to scout up there. This scout's going to come down to scout further south. We want to go on hills because that will reveal more stuff. And we're getting close to the end of the video. We've got one last technology to do. Next thing I would probably say that's good is architecture. It allows you to build cottages, which might... I don't like building cottages early on, but it does enable walls, which walls are pretty handy. And it does lead to some pretty important technologies. For example, urban planning, which you definitely want to get at a decent pace. However, in this situation, I think since we've met another civilization, I don't think he'll want to open borders, so writing's not super important. I think we want to just go for pottery. Granaries is really helpful, and after pottery we can go for road building, which will give us proper roads, which we will want for our next city. So I'm just going to plan a few turns ahead on my research. But pottery is certainly a high priority in the early game because it gives access to granaries. And granaries are great, so... I'm going to end the turn. We got our first militia. I recommend with your first militia you leave him straight in the city, but don't be afraid to move him out to your resources if you see barbarians coming towards you. Fight the barbarians. Don't just sit in your city and wait for them. If they come into your lands and it looks like you have a good chance of winning, and you have spare troops that your city's not in danger, fight them. Because if you're on the attack, you'll get more experience, which can be useful for building up an early army to declare war on people, or just to make yourself look tough so people stay away from you, which is also obviously very important. And we've finished all our early improvements. So you can finish about 3 improvements by the time you get to your first 50 turns, which means your city should be very productive. In this case, they're prioritizing working on the spices because it gives them more food, and I've told them to grow. We do want to continue to grow the city. Next thing I probably want to do is... I'm wondering if I want to build farms or not. We've got quite good growth, so what I'm going to do is actually build a mine over here. Now, for every improvement you build, I recommend you get another warrior or similar to defend it. So you want to keep building soldiers to match your improvements. Now, if I were to, for example, build... I'll worry about this later. Apparently he does want to open borders, which surprises me. Maybe that's just because he's progressive and wants to open borders, but hey-ho. Normally the Koreans don't like opening borders. Maybe they've changed that a bit. I don't know how they've changed all the personalities of civilizations in 3.5. I know that some of them have changed, but I don't want to go through the full list. I like figuring it out as I play. So maybe they've changed that a bit, but who knows. Anyway, as I was saying, some cities you won't need to worry about barbarians. If I built a city over here, for example, I wouldn't need to worry about barbarians, because chances are the majority of the map is this way, is off to the east. So if I build this, barbarians can't spawn over here because, well, it's the ocean. They could spawn down here, but I could put one warrior there, and then they'd have to bash through a very defensive location to get to the city. So I could just build a city there, and I wouldn't need any guards for it, which would be good. It means I could focus on building other things, and it could work as a sort of commercial point early on in the game. So I could build another city there, and it would be safe. But if you've got a city on your borders, make sure to staff it with a lot of military units, both to deter other civilizations and also keep barbarians at bay. But that's the first 50 turns, so we've done some early exploration. As you can see, we've pretty much discovered everywhere we want to look at. There's a lot of terrain around here with no resources, which is worrying, because it means it's not very ideal to settle. And it is inland, so we could focus on being a more coastal civilization, which is fine by me because the coast has lots of extra trade route sort of buildings, which is good. But yeah, this worries me. There's not many resources around here. We might discover more later on, and then it might become more important. But for now, we'll probably ignore expanding inwards. So yeah, at the end of your first 50 turns, you'll get a pop-up with a census. I closed it a bit too quickly. I should have left that up, but I was talking, so hey-ho. But yeah, you'll get a little pop-up. Once you close that pop-up, just take a moment, sit back, and look at what you've explored. And think about where you want to place your next city. Only think about the second city you're going to build. Don't think about every city you're going to build, just the second one that you're planning on building. Now this would be safe, but it's not amazing of a city spot. There's a swamp there which is not very good to work on. It won't have fresh water. It does get access to pearls, which is a commerce resource, and spices is a commerce resource, so it doesn't really have any food, and it's got no river, so it can't really build any farms. It's not. There could be fish here that I don't know about, so I probably want to send a scout there first before I send maybe I'll send a warrior or something there first. Because if I'm going to build a city, I want to send a guard with it as well. So maybe I'll send a warrior there first. But I don't think I'll build my first city here. I think I'm going to be a bit riskier. I could build it down here to get copper, which is certainly an idea. Could also build it down here to get copper and stone. Unfortunately, I can't build it in a way... I could build it on the Andesol. But if you remember, Andesol is where we get our special cultivations. We don't want to build on top of those. I could build on top of this because it's Kernazem, which is a different type of fertile soil, which we can't use. But again, not a particularly good spot. Oh, if you're wondering how I'm getting this little this thing to appear, which shows where your level 2 cultural borders are, you just hold Alt and press X, and it will bring up this. And if you click, it will put it on the map so you can like plan where you're going to build your cities, and you can change the colors if you want, so you can mark out where you think the AI cities are, or you know, like you might want to go red is my first city and then yellow is my second, whatever you prefer. I like to just leave it at white so it stands out nice and easily. I think I want my first city to go over here. I'll miss the marble though, and marble's really good for early wonders. However, when my capital's borders expand, which won't take too long, if I build some culture buildings, it won't take very long, then we'll get access to that. So I definitely don't want to build down here. So it's sort of a toss-up whether I build here, whether I build somewhere down here, maybe there, or somewhere like there. Or if I want to build up here. I could also build... Now that's Andesol, so I don't want to build on that either. And I do want the coast. I could also build one to the... I could build further to the right, and then build one like there. There's not a bad spot, actually. It's a bit low on production, but it does get sheep, and it could steal the spice from my capital that I'm not too worried about. Huh. I think we want to settle this way. There's good resources this way. So I'll either go here, or I could go here. Here's probably a pretty solid city. It's got 2 food resources, it's coastal, it's got fresh water, it's got plenty of hills to build mines. And I could always build another city further down this way to get the horses, which I'll probably end up doing anyway. We'll see there. We'll see like here. Yeah, city there is actually quite good. Now I don't want to build a city here straight away because it's a bit far away, and the sheep I might want to give to a city down here. So I think our first city is going to go right there. That's what we're going to build our first city. So this is our plan for the next 50 turns. We want to get our military. Our military wants to be a bit stronger, and then we want to build a settler and get our second city down. But we'll worry about that in the next episode. So until then, it's been me, Chav Commander Coffee, and I hope you're enjoying this guide series. Again, I'm sorry that I took down the other one, but I want to make it top quality for you guys, so you get the most out of it, and also with the latest version, which I've posted a link in the the intro to the guide series, where I was talking about re-uploading it. I posted a link to the SVN if you want to go and get it for yourself. If you want to wait, they are working on the installer. I'm not sure how long it's going to take, but they are working on the installer, so if you don't want to get the SVN version, you can get the installer. You should be able to get it later on this year. Probably in I would guess in a couple of months, but I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me on that. But yeah, so you can go and get this version of the game if you like, and play along. I'll probably get some more episodes of this up on Tuesday, next Tuesday, so about 3-4 days. I'll get some more episodes of this up for you guys. Until then, goodbye.